So welcome. Thank you so much for being here this evening. You should give yourselves a pat on the back because you're already taking a wonderful step in terms of actually showing up to a talk about grief and loss. I mean, it's a pretty heavy topic that most people won't even broach and talk about. I'm going to talk about it. That's the whole thing I do. So my name's Reverend Joanna Bartlett, and I like to start by telling you just a tiny little bit about myself, no long bio or anything, but I'm a reverend. I'm a minister with the National Spiritualist Association of Churches, and I'm also a certified grief recovery specialist with the Grief Recovery Institute. I'm also somebody that I've noticed through doing this work, well, actually I knew this before doing this work, that has experienced a whole lot of loss in my life, and I've had a really challenging time trying to figure out how to heal from it. I just realized I never turned the microphone on. There we go. Now you can hear me through the speakers. And you would think, so the Spiritualist Church, which is what my ministry is through, might seem kind of like an odd connection to grief recovery, but I actually got to doing grief recovery work through that connection by doing mediumship work, which is, like talking to dead people as well as, in a variety of ways, and helping people with grief counseling who had lost a loved one and wanted to connect in with them in that way. And I wanted to learn more tools to be able to help them because mediumship, I think, can be a wonderful way to begin healing, to know that your loved one is okay, to help maybe sometimes resolve some of the unresolved things. But and for some people that's what they need to get them going, and for other people they really need more than that because we're not taught how to deal with loss. We're really not taught in the society how to deal with loss. And so that's in that kind of interesting way I came to the grief recovery method. And as I started reading about it and learning about it, ostensibly to help my clients, I realized, oh, I need this for me. I need to do this work for me. This is what I've been looking for. And it's been really amazing for me. And that's why I became certified in order to be able to help lead other people through this process as well. So, grief and loss, things that we do not particularly like talking about in the society or dealing with in any way. And grief, what is grief? The grief that I talk about, it is the normal and natural reaction to loss of any kind. It's the conflicting feelings that you feel when a familiar pattern of behavior changes or ends. And if you think about that, a familiar pattern of behavior changing or ending and the feelings that result from that occurs through a lot of things in life. A lot of things cause that. So I have my lovely giant post-it note over here, which I don't have an easel for, as you can see. So hopefully this won't go terribly wrong and things will fall all over the place. But this is the interactive part. So when you think of loss, what do you think of?
A job.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
Divorce.
We got death. We got divorce. And these are the two main losses, hopefully you can read my handwriting, that people tend to think of when they think of loss. But there's actually more than 40 other kinds of losses that we experience throughout our life. I have my handy list over here. It's on the left side. What else do you have?
Leaving a job behind.
Yeah, career changes.
And a pet.
So like a pet loss of any kind, right?
Or one of your family pets.
Yeah, like if they die, or even if you have to give them up for adoption because something changes in your life, because you move, or because you have a kid, or because, I don't know, some...
Griefs too.
Huh?
Both of those are griefs too.
Yes, that's true. There you go. You guys already know it, right? So moving, so basically, I would say anything to do with children, which I'm a mom, I know this one well. So whether that is having a child, and successfully having a wonderful, healthy newborn baby, that can be grief because it is a change in your life. It's a change or end of a familiar pattern of behavior of being a person that did not have another human being attached to them at all times and needing them. If you have, a miscarriage, that's a death or a stillbirth or even an abortion or adoption or suddenly an illness of a child or the death of a child or children moving out, having an empty nest, kind of anything to do with children. Love them, but they can cause grief and loss. The breakup of a romantic relationship is another one. It's,
The loss of your physicality, your physical or mental ability.
So like loss of health in some
Yeah.
way?
Mhm.
Yeah. What else is on my list? I got a whole list. Moving. You got moving, especially moving, sometimes moving as an adult, some even moving as a child, especially if you were, you know, your parents got a new job or had to move for some reason, and they're like, we're gonna move to Cincinnati, and you're like, well, all my friends are here, and it's a loss of, you know, your, maybe the only home you ever knew, your friends, your school, and it's usually a loss that is not very well managed. Sometimes it's like, oh yeah, we'll go back and visit. Do you ever go back and visit? You know, maybe once if you're lucky. And it's, you know, it's, oh well, it'll be better where we're going. You're gonna make new friends. You have a new school. It'll be great. And it doesn't ever really acknowledge the actual loss that you're feeling as a result.
In divorce, I was thinking it's two-edged sword.
Mm-hmm.
It affects the adults and, of course, the children too.
Can affect the children as well.
Mhm.
Yes. And then there are what they call intangible losses, which aren't really intangible, but those can, so sexual assault, if I can spell. And then, which includes loss of trust, loss of control of your body,
Loss of faith.
loss of faith, definitely, with religion. And the list kind of goes on, right? There's so many things that we can experience throughout our life that are losses. And so, how many of you here are still hurting from any of these kinds of losses that you've experienced earlier in your life? Sometimes it's last month or a year ago, it might be 10 years ago or 20 years ago, because we're not really taught the tools to actually move through loss and heal from loss. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. This is the part where I tell you about the emotional wounds from my childhood. It's to illustrate a point, and it's also to let you know that, you know, I get this work. So all of these things happened to me before I was 18 years old. So my parents got divorced when I was 4. I was sexually assaulted when I was 7. My mom was depressed and wasn't really able to be there for me in many of the ways that I needed. My dad remarried, and my stepmom really did not want children. And so my needs were not met in that way either. My dad was emotionally distant and not available. His dad, my granddad, died. Then I moved to another country with my mom, so I had a loss of country, loss of connection to my family and my homeland, where I unfortunately experienced a lot more sexual assault and harassment and bullying at school. We had financial issues, loss of finances. I don't think I wrote that one down, but that's one as well. And experienced physical and emotional neglect from my mom. Then we moved to another country again, so I had a second loss of country. This was when I was 14, and I had some pets die in there too. I think some pet loss, and then I was in a car accident when I was 14 or 15 and ended up with chronic back pain. So I had a loss of health, loss of hopes, dreams, expectations about my future. Romantic breakups, you know, as a teenager, I know it's puppy love, but it was real to me. You know, my first love at 14, that was like serious. I was all invested into that. And when it ended, it was still heartbreak. Had another cat die on Christmas Eve of all times. It's the saddest story ever. And then loss of health due to chronic illness. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. I became ill with fibromyalgia when I was 17. So all of these things happened before I was even an adult. And no one along the way really taught me how to successfully deal with this grief and this loss, because we're just not taught this. My parents weren't taught this. My mom wasn't taught this, so she couldn't pass that teaching on to me. And often what we actually do learn about trying to deal with grief and loss isn't particularly helpful. It isn't actually useful, and usually what people will tell us when loss occurs isn't helpful to us at all. So I want to talk about a little bit about that, some of the myths that we are taught about dealing with grief. And so you've probably heard of these. Let's see. See if this works. Very high tech. So you've probably heard some of these things when loss occurred to you. This is working so well. So our first one. Hello. Let's pretend that's not over there. Can't see it on the camera. It doesn't exist. The first one is don't feel bad. How many of you heard that as kids, especially? Something bad happened. Something bad happened at school, maybe you hurt yourself, somebody didn't talk to you, and you came home and you told a parent or caregiver about it, and they said, don't feel bad, because they don't want you to feel bad. They want you to feel better, and so they think, it's like telling somebody to calm down when they're upset. Like, how many times does that actually work? Somebody's like, calm down. Oh, okay, I'm calm now. Like, we don't operate that way. Don't feel bad works the same way. You don't just not feel bad because somebody says, oh, don't feel bad, no matter how well-meaning it is, but it's something that we are programmed with. Another one is, the second one, is replace the loss. So, you had a romantic breakup, perhaps. You've heard, oh, there are plenty of other fish in the sea. You'll meet somebody else. Like, you can just replace the loss that you've experienced with, like, another person. And we do this kind of over and over again. Sometimes as kids, it might be like your bike was stolen, or, something small like that happened. It's like, well, we can buy you another bike, or a pet died, we'll get another pet. That kind of thing. But that doesn't actually help you resolve the feelings of loss that you're experiencing. The third one, and this is a big one for me, growing up as an English person, is grieve alone, right? You got something to cry, if you need to cry, go cry in your room. Laugh and the world laughs with you, cry and you cry alone. If you're going to cry, I'll give you something to cry about. Go do it in your room. These are things like, right? We've heard these things. You may have been told these things. This is why you're like, oh yeah, oh, you're laughing, because you're like, oh, this is too familiar. But we're taught to grieve alone. We're not taught to share our grief with other people. We're not taught to share our grief with other people because it makes them really uncomfortable and they don't know what to do with it. And so they say, well, don't feel bad. Here, have a cookie. The next one, we'll get to the cookies in a minute. We have be strong for others. I'm very good at this one myself. I've done like all of these things, is to be strong for other people. Right? Something, a loss occurs in your family. How many of you are like, okay, well, I'm gonna buck up and I'm gonna be the strong one. I'm gonna help everybody else get through it and not go through the grieving process really yourself. The next one is stay busy. Just keep busy. Just keep doing stuff. And if you do that for long enough, you give it enough time, you'll feel better. Do you? Really? Those losses we were talking about, how many years ago did those happen? Have you given them enough time yet? Like, how much time are you supposed to be giving them exactly to feel better? It doesn't work. These are the myths that we've been fed, that we've been taught, largely because the people who taught them to us, that's what they were taught, and they didn't know any better. They're doing the best that they could with what they had, but they don't work. And so the things that we've been using to try and heal from loss are not actually useful tools. The Grief Recovery Institute likes to use this analogy, and I tell everybody this analogy because I think it's great personally. Of imagine if I came into this room and I had a can of paint and I had a screwdriver, a saw, and a hammer, and I said, "Hey guys, come paint this room," right? What do? I'll take suggestions. Well, it doesn't have to be a rhetorical question. You got a screwdriver, a saw, and a hammer.
Picture right here with the hammer.
Well, that's like the most inventive one I've heard. That's like, cool. I kind of deserve it, yeah. But so people have gone, well, I don't know, like use a screwdriver to open the can of paint. I guess it's a useful tool. And the other things, you like smear the paint around.
Style.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I guess you could like throw it around and smear it. So we would kind of paint the room, but it would be a huge mess. So these are the tools that we've been given to heal from grief. No wonder we're making a mess of it. Like, what else were we going to be doing? The other thing that happens is that when we have experienced a loss, the things that people tell us are, because they also are trying to use these tools, They don't know what to say. They don't know how to be helpful to us. And so someone somewhere, I actually need to look this up at some point, did a study and said that within 3 days after loss, 85% of comments that grievers hear are unhelpful. 15% of things that people are told after they've experienced a loss are actually helpful things. Like, I'm so sorry, tell me what happened. Or do you want to talk about it? Do you want to, tell me about your mom, tell me about whatever. The other 85% of the comments were not helpful things. Things like, and you may have heard these, you may have even said them and it's okay because you didn't know. You probably didn't say this one, like if you ever know somebody who's lost a child to death, you probably hopefully never said, well, you can have another child. But that's one of the things that people will say, which seems completely horrific to me. Be glad of the time that you had together. For instance, a spouse that you've been with for 40 years or a grandmother, well, at least she lived for, for so long, or they're in a better place. It was God's plan. They're not hurting anymore. These aren't actually helpful things. They're true. They're not untrue, right? So say if, actually, I don't know if I can have more children at this point, but like physically, not just, psychologically handle it. My youngest is 12 and, like they're pubating. And pubating is a wild experience. But say if I did lose a child, and somebody said, well, at least you can have another child. Like that may be technically true and completely unhelpful and devastating to hear. Because that's what these comments are. And the reason that they hurt so much is we don't deal with grief in our heads, in our intellect. We can't think our way through grief or out of grief. We deal with grief in our hearts. It hurts in our hearts, right? So we need things that help with that emotional process to help us move through the grief process within our hearts. So when we don't know how to heal from grief, what happens is the grief that is not resolved, not healed, it stays unresolved within us. We carry it around with us. We talk about our baggage, right? I've had my baggage. And we try to let go of it, maybe. We try to put it down, but it's like it's stuck to us. We can't put the baggage down no matter how we try. And it builds up and it accumulates. So, you heard my lovely list of things I experienced by the time I was an adult. So when I was an adult and more stuff, and I was supposed to know how to deal with things because, I was like 18, 19 years old. I was supposed to know how to adult and do life. And more loss happened. I had all this accumulated loss that I was already carrying around. And then I had the additional loss, which has this effect of resonating to all that previous loss that you still haven't quite dealt with. And so it just hurts even more. It builds up, grief accumulates and it's cumulatively negative. And that's one of the reasons people don't like to talk about grief. Like if you've had a loss occur, you may have noticed that after you've heard the unhelpful comments for the first, week or two or however long, then people either stop talking to you about the loss that you've had, because, they don't want to bring it up because you may have forgotten, you might have suddenly forgotten that day, that minute, you're not actively crying or looking really sad because you've learned how to put on your I'm fine face. And so they don't want to bring it up. Or they change the subject. Or they just stop talking to you altogether. They stop inviting you to things. They stop checking in with you. They stop, because your loss also resonates. It's it reverberates against all their own unhealed loss as well. It makes them uncomfortable because they don't know how to deal with their grief. So what this looks like in your life, it shows up in a variety of ways, and you may recognize some of these in yourself, and it's okay. Be gentle with yourself. It shows up as reduced concentration, disrupted sleeping patterns, depression, lack of energy, not being present, being out of the moment, of always being somewhere else. Low-grade anger, for some people being kind of irritable all the time. Isolation, isolating yourself. Grief alone, learned that one well. Feeling stuck, just feeling kind of stuck in your life. Things aren't quite right, things aren't supposed to be the way that they're feeling, but you don't know how to kind of move forward and get unstuck. Engaging in behaviors that you don't really want to be doing, especially like habitual things, you sit down to watch TV for half an hour and 2 hours later you're on episode 5 of Grace and Frankie or whatever it is you're watching. I like them. Illnesses and accidents. You know, sometimes not because you're not in the moment, you're out of the moment, and so you're more likely to fall or be in a car accident or get ill because grief will show up in the body. It's trying to express, it's trying to get your attention, and it will find a variety of ways to do that. So one of the things, and I'll just touch on this briefly, one of the ways that we try to help ourselves feel better is with this thing called short-term energy relieving behaviors. They used to be called short-term feeling relieving behaviors, but in the book, in the Grief Recovery Handbook, but that doesn't make a nice acronym. Like these are called STIRBs, which I think isn't still a great acronym, but whatever. Anyway, so you can probably guess what some of these things are. Can you think of any things, and I'll make another little list. Hopefully I'm not annoying you with my lists. The STIRBs, any behaviors that you know you've engaged in, or that you've seen other people, you have a friend that is engaged in these behaviors to try to distract themselves, perhaps, from the feelings, or avoid the feelings, displace the feelings they're feeling around grief and loss. Can you think of any?
Overeating. Alcohol.
Yeah?
Shopping, spending.
Yep. Retail therapy, that's what we call this one. What else? Fantasy, you know, whether that's TV, video games,
Sex.
books. Yep.
Well,
Some of these in moderation are not terrible, but I'll tell you why they're not awesome. Anger is another one. Using anger as a way to displace other feelings. Exercise.
High-risk behavior, like,
yeah, I was
like
Just doing
things
crazy
that might kill
stuff.
you. Yes.
Because, well, at least you're feeling something different, right?
Right, exactly, adrenaline seeking.
What else is on the list? Shopping, exercise. Workaholism. Which one's that? Stay busy.
Yeah.
Working too much. You know, scrolling through Facebook, perhaps, endlessly. Anyone looking for something, trying to feel a little bit different, which I would put in kind of like, you know, social media. It's kind of a fantasy. Looking for fantasy, perhaps. So these are the things that we tend to do instead, because we don't really know how to get ourselves unstuck, or we don't know how to feel the things that we're feeling in a safe way and move through them. And these are things that our society teaches us to do. And some of these things, you know, exercise, not a terrible thing to do, generally. But the problem with STIRBs is that when you have stopped doing these distracting or avoiding behaviors, the loss is still there. Your feelings are still there. When you go to bed at night, in that time you've like actually plugged your phone into charge and you're not actively looking at it anymore, scrolling through Facebook. I don't do that at all. I try not to. But when you go to bed at night, those feelings are still there and the loss is still there. Because these distract you from it, but they don't help to resolve it. Some of them can be detrimental to your life and cause additional problems in your life rather than helping you move forward. But even if they're just kind of neutral, you're not dealing with the root problem. And it's important for you to know there's nothing wrong with you. You're supposed to feel terrible after you've experienced loss. Like, that's completely normal. You grieving after a significant loss of your life, that's healthy. You're supposed to feel that. Like, if you didn't feel anything, that would not be okay. Something would be wrong there. So what can you do? So I told you all of the reasons that like we're hopeless and terrible about dealing with grief and loss. So what can you do? You can do things. There is help. So the Grief Recovery Institute says that recovery from loss is achieved by a series of small and correct actions. It's kind of funny. What are the correct actions? Tell me. So awareness of what loss and grief is, understanding more about loss and grief and what's really going on there and why you're feeling the way you're feeling. Awareness of the tools that don't work. So we've already done 2 of the things. You've already learned 2 of the important things tonight. Congrats. You're on your way. Discovering your own losses, looking at your own life, and taking an emotionally honest look at the losses that you've experienced. Discovering what relationships are still incomplete for you, because really all loss happens in relationship. All the losses we experience are happening in a relationship to somebody else. Accepting responsibility for your part in what still feels incomplete and unresolved, and the pain and what happened during the course of that relationship, the ups and the downs, right? We're both involved. There are two people in a relationship. You both got stuff that's going on in there. Identifying what you still need to communicate, because a lot of what feels bad and unresolved is that, we in every relationship we have these hopes and dreams and expectations about what that's gonna look like. If say it's a marriage, and either it ends because of death or divorce, there's a future that you imagined that you would have with this person. Or there are things that were painful or hurtful and unresolved that this person's no longer in your life, so how can you ever resolve them? And so discovering what those things are, what you still need to communicate and process through your heart about that relationship, communicating those things in a safe way that doesn't involve talking to that person, and then saying goodbye to the pain. And that's how you heal from grief. I use the grief recovery method to do this because I found it to be the most practical, useful, kind of easiest way to do all those things and to move through it, and to do it in a very a way that makes sense, a process that really makes sense. So it's a doable program that leads you through the steps to recovery from loss. It has been used for almost 40 years by about 500,000 people worldwide, so it's not a thing that I made up. It was created by John James and Russell Friedman, and John James created it as he was trying to heal from the loss of his young son, and went through a whole bunch of different grief programs and talked to lots of people, and I think also through intuition, discovered this as a way to help people really, truly, finally heal. And so he's been teaching it, and it's been used worldwide now for almost 40 years. And it's how I've healed from the pain of my losses. Because that list at the beginning, that was the beginning. Then the rest of my life happened. I've been divorced twice and remarried for the third marriage. My mom died 7 years ago from cancer. I had a difficult relationship with my dad. I had just, on and on and on and on, it seems. A bunch more losses in my adult life that I still didn't know how to deal with, that I've actually been able to move through and process using the grief recovery method. The way that it works is, so there's 3 different ways that you can do this work. Yeah, pretty much. Well, yeah, there's 3 different ways you can do this. You can get the grief recovery handbook, which is what I use in my classes, and you can do it by yourself. That's what I did. I got it, and I started working through, I think, 4 or 5 relationships on my own, which is not how you're supposed to do it. You're actually supposed to find a partner and do it with like another person. I taught my therapist how to be my heart with ears, which is what we do. We're a heart with ears for each other to witness and listen.
Could you repeat that?
Oh, I taught my therapist how to be the person I needed to be to go through the process. It's called a heart with ears, is the way that it's put. Like you're a giant heart. You got a pair of ears. You don't have a mouth, so you don't talk. You don't insert your opinion. You just listen. You can work one-on-one with me. I see people one-on-one. I have an office downtown Eugene, or you can be part of a support group, which is what I have starting next week. However you do it, I think is a great way to do it, because it's so worthwhile. And I actually have someone here who is going to tell you a little bit about their experience doing this in the group format. And so I'll introduce Suzanne very briefly. So, and I told her I was going to say this, so I'm not breaking anything that's confidential, because everything that we share within the group or one-on-one is confidential. Suzanne was in my group in January, right?
I think it was.
Yes. And she came into the group wanting to heal from the loss of her husband. And the first week she was in the group, we met in the meditation room. I remember her looking at me at the end and saying, like, does this really work? Like, I could see she was in so much pain still that she thought maybe this was just a whole, a bunch of bollocks, as we would say in England. There's no way that it could possibly help ease her pain and help her feel better and help her actually move through the grief and heal. And she'll tell you more about it. But that's how she came. And I said, trust me. And I tell everybody this, and I'll tell you this if you do this work with me. I say, just trust me. Just it's totally fine to feel apprehensive, to feel scared, to think it's a bunch of hooey. It's totally fine. Do the steps anyway. Just give it a try. Do the steps anyway. Give yourself, permission to do it and the gift of doing it, because it can really make a difference. And I will let Suzanne tell you about her experience.
Good evening. Well, I was married for a very long time. I was married for 43 years. And I was very, very close with my husband. We spent a lot of time together. And he died, it'll be 2 years in August. So I was absolutely devastated. Didn't know what to do. Moved up to Portland to spend some time with family. Knew enough to know that I just knew I had to feel my feelings. I knew that I had to not avoid the pain. So I just kind of got, because it's there. It was there and it wasn't going anywhere and it was overwhelming. So I, after about a year, decided I wanted to come back to Eugene because I'd lived here for 30 years with my husband. We were musical people, still am, wrote a lot of songs together and played a lot of music. And this gap, this lack of the person's physical presence was just completely overpowering. So I started to come back to the Center for Spiritual Living, and I heard about this workshop, and I was doubtful. How could something like this actually help me on a deeper level? But I was willing to try whatever I could try. So I did question Joanne, and I kept coming back though. And I felt that through this methodology that I started to feel lighter and lighter. And what helped me was pretty much from the beginning of the workshop, I was paired with one person. And every week I would share with this person and listen. I would share, he would listen, and then we switch roles. And the thing about this workshop is you don't have to have somebody die. You don't have to have this cataclysmic thing happen in your life. My partner, for example, had something that was moderately bothering him. He didn't feel like tackling the big stuff. I did because it was overwhelming in my life. So you can choose what you want to deal with. I followed the methodology. I showed up every week. I found that the relationship graph that I did was extremely helpful to really help put things in perspective. And at the end, there's something called a completion letter, where you say goodbye to the pain. Now, this is interesting because I had, during this time, stopped playing music, and I had actually written a song, the first song that I had written since my husband passed, called There Will Never Be Goodbye. So, you know, when you have a loss like that, there is never goodbye in your heart. But on some level, you have to say goodbye to the pain. And do I still miss my husband? Yeah. Do I still feel I feel some sort of pain, but all I can tell you is it's different. It's not this, oh my God, what am I going to do? I can't go on. I can go on. It's a new going on. It's a rediscovering. I still feel Gene's presence, but I know he's not here physically, and I still cry sometimes, and I still miss him. You know, of course, that's going to happen. But all I can tell you is I feel a lot lighter. I feel a lot lighter, and I have felt that this has been, of all the things that I've done to help myself, because I tried a lot of different things. Of all the things that I've tried to help myself, this was the most effective. And I also think that I was really ready for it. I had done enough work prior to this that I felt, even though I was in a lot of pain, I was just open enough and ready enough to be able to experience this. So all I can say is that I highly recommend it, and it was a very impactful, wonderful thing for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. Yeah, so there you hear it from somebody that's actually been through it. It's not just me saying this has made such a difference in my life, and it really has. And what's really interesting is that for me, that's how I would explain it too. Is I feel lighter.
Yes.
I just feel lighter. I feel like I guess I literally put the baggage down because I'm not carrying it anymore. And so as a result, emotionally, I feel so much lighter. Do I still feel sadness? Like, well, yeah, I'm like still human. Of course, I still miss my mom. There's still stuff that comes up where I go, oh, I wish my mom was here. I wonder what she would have to say about this. Or like my relationship with my dad, who is still alive. And we don't have, we're not quite estranged, but like almost, might as well be, emotionally anyway. But I feel like I've reset emotionally around the relationship. It doesn't hurt anymore. It's been a gaping wound I've been carrying around my whole life, and it just doesn't hurt. And it's the most interesting thing to kind of think about it and go, huh, I just don't have that pain. Like, how did that happen? And so, but it happened by going through the grief recovery method and going through the process, completing what was incomplete and unresolved and painful, and saying and being willing to say goodbye to the pain. So it really, really does. It really does work. It seems a little bit magical to me because the process is, there are some kind of assignments. You get homework every week, essentially. And some of it's kind of hard. It can be, sometimes it gets a little tricky, a little hard emotionally. But sometimes it also feels really good. It's like when you're getting a massage in like a sore spot that you're like, oh, finally it's getting attention. It really keep going. It feels really good. Or it feels very empowering to look at the truth of your life, and look at the truth of a relationship, your emotional truth, and to go, this is what I experienced, and to know that you can then do something with that. It's not just like digging it up and getting it out and leaving it around with the mess. It's like, okay, well now we'll figure out what is incomplete and how I'm going to resolve it, and then you do, and you're like, oh my God, it's like decluttering your prompt closet or the junk drawer in the kitchen or something, and you open it and suddenly everything is like where it's supposed to be, and it's so much lighter and easier, but on an emotional level. So this next support group, it starts next Tuesday, same time, same place, 7 to 9 p.m. It runs for 8 weeks. It's not a drop-in group. It is an 8-week commitment where you really do need to show up for as many weeks as you can in that 8 weeks. You do get homework every week, or assignments, or whatever you want to call it. We use the Grief Recovery Handbook, and I explain everything so it's not confusing or overwhelming. You'll be partnered with 1 or 2 other people to talk about the vulnerable stuff. You're not, the group we can have up to 15 people in the group, but it's not like you share everything all the time with 15 people, because I would not like to do that. That would not work for me at all, no. Remember, grieve alone, very good at that. So you're sharing just with, it's often we have groups of 2 or 3. And it's absolutely confidential. Anything that you share within that group, we do not talk about to anybody, else in our lives. And it's a safe place to heal. So the cost, we always love talking about money. It's the other thing we don't like talking about. We got grief, we got money, and I do both in one night. I'm so lucky.
You also talk about shame, because then we can have all.
Ooh, no, you have to watch some Brene Brown for me, I think. Sorry. I'll work on that. I'll see if I can work some shame into things as well. Being vulnerable, right? How to be vulnerable. I'm working on that myself. So the cost, I offer this on a sliding scale basis because I want it to be available for as many people as possible. So I ask for between $125 to $400. the kind of like, if you're like, oh, that's way too confusing, Joanna, I'm in grief and making decisions is too hard, I say 275 is your suggested cost. For the 8 weeks, it includes the book, and you get to heal. So you'll get, I have a list. You'll resolve one incomplete relationship in your life. We don't try to fix your entire life or to heal all of your emotional pain that's been stacking up all these years in 8 weeks. But you'll learn a lot about grief and loss and tools, the tools that don't work, and you'll learn tools that do. And you'll complete one incomplete relationship. You'll get the benefit of feeling so much lighter, and the energy that you've been instead spending on doing these things, you're not going to be having to avoid those feelings anymore. So you have more energy. And you'll learn the tools to address all your other incomplete relationships. And I'll continue to provide you support and a framework to continue working through more relationships if you choose to do so. And you'll know how to recover from grief and loss, because like loss will continue to occur in your life. I wish I could tell you that it won't, that once you've like learned how to heal from grief and loss, everything will be great forever. But it won't, because it's life, and loss will continue to occur. And my list of those things, moving and all those different losses, you'll probably continue to experience them. But you'll have new tools, so that when they do occur, you'll be able to identify them for what they are, and not try to tell yourself that you're overreacting or minimize it or whatever that we tend to do. So a familiar pattern of behavior will end or change, and you'll feel upset about it, and you'll go, oh, this is grief I'm feeling. I've experienced a loss. All right, that makes sense. And you can be more gentle with yourself. So maybe you don't do these things, and maybe do less of these things. Or when you start to do these things, because I still do some of these, especially food, I'll go, oh, Joanna, you're drinking heavy whipping cream out of the carton. Like, is something going on with you? And I can use that as an indicator rather than like a displacer. When I go, oh, I need to pay attention to something here. I think I must be upset about something. So it helps in that way. And it will help you recover. It'll help you really recover from grief and loss. So I'll leave you with this. What is recovery from grief? Like, what does that actually mean? So it means feeling better. It means feeling lighter inside. It means having that kind of emotional reset, so that when more stuff occurs, you're not dealing with it from that place of accumulated grief. It means being able to enjoy fond memories, especially of somebody who's died, without them turning painful. It's knowing that it's okay to feel sad from time to time, and that it's okay to talk about those feelings. Recovery means having the skills to deal with loss, and recovery is finding new meaning for living without the fear of being hurt again, because you know that you have a way to deal with that hurt should it occur. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take your questions. The one thing I did not mention for the group is that you can hold your spot. You can reserve your spot with a $50 deposit, because the last one did actually fill up, and I don't know what's going to happen this time. I guess we'll find out. But that will hold your spot, and then you can. I have some info on the back table in terms of kind of some expectations and paying for the rest of it and all of that. But does anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
Is there a process in the group to help decide which loss to focus on?
Is there a process to help decide which loss to focus on? Yes, there is. We do help with that. So the book provides some guidance, and I provide some guidance as well. And like Suzanne mentioned, really, no loss is the wrong loss. The book will say, it's interesting. The book seems to say, my interpretation is like, start with your parents. So start with your mother. It's all your mother's fault. In terms of, we often have the things that we learned about loss, and often started, with our first primary people growing up, just our parents. But you don't have to do that. For some people, it's often the loss that's most affecting your life right now is the one that I would recommend that you start with, the one that's having the most impact on you. But yes, I will help you figure that out. That's a very long answer to say yes. You'll get guidance. I'll help you. Any other questions?
Can I add to
Yeah.
that question or answer that question? I was in Joanne's 8-week class in the winter. I missed 2 because I had an outbreak of shingles, but I came back in, and I want to say that the book is very supportive. So when you're doing your alone time, your homework, as you call it, it's a very good resource. And Joanna's support was incredible. Your materials were very clear cut, and her through the internet, your reminders and all. I always felt connected. I always felt like I was kind of in this network of connection, but I never lost it. And I want to say that I do not have a therapist. I had one unfortunate meeting with a therapist, one. And I could not have done this work as effectively with the therapist, I don't think, as I did with the two people. I was in a group of 3 people. And that feeling of trust, the fact that they were going through what I was going through, their story was different than mine, but the pain was the same kind of thing. And I felt so open. I could not have done that with a therapist in such a short period of time. And specifically, I had in mind a target relationship, but as I kind of went through, it actually looked like I was going into a cave in my mind, deep, deep into this cave of grief, And I got to a spot where it was very painful. And so that trigger point became the relationship that I worked on, and it was such a surprise to me. I'm going to start crying. Because it had been pushed down so deep, and I was able, to bring it up and talk about it. So it was a wonderful experience. And I would have paid, well, if we're talking about money, right, I would have paid a therapist more than what I paid for this class, and I'm quite sure I would have derived a lot less. So.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I had to say that.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I am totally sold on this work and on this method, and I continue to use it in my life because I still have stuff to heal from. Haven't done it all yet, and that's and that's fine. I have the tools to do it. I can do it, and
Right.
it's. I love hearing how much of huge benefit it's made to other people. It's not just me. It's not just
That
me. It's great.
feeling of lightness is
Yeah.
right on spot on.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So were there other methods that you dabbled in or really went deeper in until you came across this method? And I mean, I guess it's how many products did you try out? I mean, I'm kind of trying to get a sense of
Yeah.
you discovered this one, it's that's the one you went with, or you just really had other things. I mean, other than the fact, just the average not knowing how to deal with loss. Do you kind of get what I'm asking?
Yeah. So, what other methods have I tried? So I don't know
How is this different?
how is this different than those. So I've been in therapy since I was probably about 20 or 21. I'm 42 now. Not constantly, but pretty much the whole time trying to deal with my issues, my baggage. And it's been helpful because I'm still here. I'm still standing and I'm getting on with my life. So win for therapy. And I've tried doing a lot of work on my own, I guess, a lot of processing on my own, a lot of journaling. I went through a period of doing depth journaling for a while, which was helpful, but still didn't quite complete the pain. I was able to bring it up. Being good at being able to bring it up. I wrote a memoir, actually, about the 4 years I lived in Barbados. Spent a year or so writing an entire book about it, trying to heal the pain. Trying to think if there's any kind of concrete methods or processes that I've gone through that I can think of. What I found doing this method and going through this process is it was really enlightening for me in the sense that I had a lot of aha moments, oh, this is what I've been trying to do in different iterations over and over and over again for the last since I was 16. Oh God, that's a long time. 27 years, I guess. So that I've been trying to heal in different ways. and this works. Like I've been trying like all kinds of kind of different ways, maybe not concrete, like I tried the whatever method and the whatever method, but in a whole bunch of different ways. And this has gotten at what's been unresolved for me in a way that nothing else has.
And how did you find this method? You found the book and read it and went there, or what was your
Divine intervention, I think. I actually found it a year prior, and I thought, oh, I should get certified in this method. That would be cool. And then, I don't know, life happened or something. And then, like in an online group that I was in, somebody mentioned it, and I was like, oh, I should look into that for my clients. That would be helpful. So I bought the book and started reading it. And it is probably the first nonfiction book that I've read, not just read cover to cover, like in a fairly short period of time, but actually followed all the directions in. You know how most nonfiction books, it's like, okay, get out your journal and reflection point about whatever. I'm like, yeah, whatever, that's too hard. But this one, and maybe it just found me at the right time and the right space, but it said, I think the first one was about the myths of grief, like write down some of the myths of grief. I'm like, oh, that's easy, I could do that. Like all of the directions were very, very clear and doable, so that it wasn't any confusion, and so it got through any of the emotional overwhelm that you might, naturally experience when you're thinking about grief and loss. And I did it, and I just actually followed the instructions, and then I felt better, and I went, oh, I want to do this again with another relationship. And then I went, oh, I want to learn how to share this with people. I want other people to experience this too. So I teach people, one of the other things I do is I teach people how to trust their intuition and how to listen to their inner voice. And that's also how I find this work helpful, is because you need to heal your past losses in order to really connect in with yourself and trust yourself. And this, to me, honestly, it's very woo-woo, I know that, but it feels like one of those things that kind of dropped into my life when I needed it to, and I just went with it. I went, okay, thanks, universe. So I don't know if that helps, that answers your question.
Yes, it does.
Okay. Anyone else?
One last
Okay.
question for me. So how do you find the support group members? It's like, how do you advertise, or who's usually in the group? I mean, is it largely Center for Spiritual Living people, or?
Not necessarily. So, I mean, I have, I do my, micro business marketing things. It's just me. So, I have a website, I have a newsletter, and I have a Facebook page. I do some advertising, and a lot of it now is word of mouth. It's people who have gone through the program with me, either one-on-one or in the group, and have gone, you need to try this. Like in the last group, I had somebody I'd done one-on-one work with invite like 3 or 4 friends, I think, to this talk, and then a couple of them did the group because they're like, you just have to do this thing. It's worth it. You should do it. So kind of a variety of ways. I'm happy for people to find me however they find me. If it's the right thing for them. And honestly, that's really what it comes down to. This needs to be the right thing for you to do. That something within you is like, yeah, I think I need to do this thing. That it feels right to you, that you're willing to make that commitment to show up, every week if you possibly can for 8 weeks, to do the homework in between. And that you're willing to, even if you're like, I'm not quite sure what's going to happen here. I'm not quite sure how this thing works. Like this lady said that it works, and a couple of other people said that it works. I don't know. But I'm willing to give it a go. I'm willing to, feel my apprehension or my discomfort and do it anyway. And so you have to be in that right place. And so I want people who are in that right place to join me in this next group, because I know it's great. I know that it does work. And I want everybody to do the right thing for them, honestly. Whatever that happens to me, if it's working one-on-one with me, that's great. If it's doing the group, that's great. If it's doing it by yourself with the book, that's great. With a friend, awesome. If it's not right now, that's okay. That's honest, right? And so that's okay too. It's all really depends on where you're at and where you're ready and willing to go. So I will end here, and I will be at the back to answer any more questions that you have, and just kind of generally be available. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for being here and showing up and listening to me.